Welcome to Tales from Sector 9, your portal to immersive sci-fi audio stories. If you enjoy deep space action, rogue AIs, and conspiracy theories, you're in the right place. Tap like and subscribe to keep the adventures coming. Drop a comment and tell us where in the galaxy you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and prepare for tonight's story. Death Star, Deck 487. Toren Korrin had his left arm buried to the shoulder inside the coolant regulator when the temperature climbed another 6 degrees. Again, he said. Outside the access conduit, Lyra Dane leaned toward the portable diagnostic panel balanced across her knees. Flow rate steady at 41.2, pressure unchanged, return temperature is 178. Toren stopped moving. That isn't possible. I know. Read the secondary. 177. The tertiary? 180. Toren turned his head as far as the narrow conduit allowed. Cold white maintenance light reflected from bundle conduits and polished coolant lines running away into darkness. The space smelled faintly of machine oil, hot insulation, and the metallic sharpness of ionized air. Regulator position? 38%. It should be freezing. Tell it. Toren withdrew his hand and stared at the actuator assembly. The regulator was open exactly as commanded. No scoring on the vanes. No obstruction in the bypass channel. Servo response had been clean. The diagnostic package insisted the unit was operating below nominal load. Yet the coolant passing through it was hot enough that Toren could feel the warmth through the housing. He pressed 2 fingers against the pipe. Too warm, not a failed sensor. Kill the local monitor, Lyra hesitated. Chief? Disconnect it. She pulled the coupler from the diagnostic panel. The temperature display went blank. Toren reached into his toolkit and connected a simple handheld thermal probe directly to the return line. The number appeared. 179.4. Lyra let out a quiet breath. So, it's real. It's real. But nothing in 487 is pulling enough energy to do that. Toren looked deeper into the conduit. That was the part he didn't like. Maintenance Sector 487 was not glamorous. It contained environmental pumps, power conditioners, secondary coolant loops, and enough diagnostic equipment to keep a small city functioning. Nothing in the sector should have generated this kind of thermal load unless 3 independent systems were simultaneously operating far outside specification. They weren't. The regulator wasn't broken. Something upstream was sending heat into a system designed to carry it away. A vibration passed through the conduit. Toren felt it first through his palms. Not an impact, not machinery nearby. Something vast and distant had moved. The pipes around him hummed. Then the blast door 20 meters behind Lyra slammed shut. She flinched. A second door closed farther down the maintenance passage, then another. Red strips illuminated along the floor. A calm, synthesized voice filled the corridor. Attention. Superlaser firing sequence initiated. Non-essential power draw restricted. Maintain assigned stations. Lyra relaxed slightly. There. Toren climbed backward out of the conduit. There what? The superlaser. That explains the load. It explains a load. He wiped coolant residue from his hand. The Death Star had fired the weapon before. Every firing caused disturbances in systems that had nothing to do with the superlaser itself. Power priorities shifted. Environmental systems compensated for heat. Secondary grids carried loads nobody had intended them to carry during ordinary operations. A battle station this large never did only one thing at a time. Toren looked at the portable probe. The temperature fell. He frowned. Lyra saw it too. That's good. No. The number dropped to 161. That's too fast. Toren crossed to the wall console and opened the coolant distribution schematic. Half the lines remained green. Then one of the primary feeds feeding Sector 487 changed to amber. A moment later, it went grey. Coolant pressure held steady only because an auxiliary loop had opened automatically. They diverted us, Toren said. To the superlaser? Maybe. Another vibration moved through the deck. This one had an edge to it. The lights flickered. A status window opened on the wall display without being requested. External weapons, impact surface sector. 47 damage assessment pending. Lyra stared at it. Around them, the maintenance room went very quiet. Then the public address system chimed. Attention all personnel. Rebel starfighter elements have penetrated the defensive perimeter. The attack presents no significant threat to station operations. Remain at assigned duty stations. Someone behind Toren muttered, "Rebels?" Toren ignored him. He was watching the coolant schematic. The diverted feed did not return. "Lyra?" "Yes?" "Pull every environmental change for the last 5 minutes. Chief, everyone. Pumps, pressure, heat exchangers, ventilation. I want power routing changes too. You think this isn't the weapon? I think we stopped repairing a regulator 3 minutes ago." He looked once more at the damage report glowing on the wall. "Now we're diagnosing the station." The monitoring room had been designed for 6 technicians. 14 were crowded into it now. Displays covered the bulkhead from waist height to ceiling, each showing a different sliver of a machine so large that no one in the room had ever seen more than a fraction of it. Toren stood behind Lyra while she stacked timelines. "Turbolaser capacitors increased demand at 1423, she said. "Environmental pumps dropped 3% 2 seconds later. Expected. Ventilation pressure changed in 486, 488, and 492. Expected if they're reallocating. 3 turbo-lift trunks suspended. That could be battle routing. Primary coolant reduced to us. We know." Lyra added another data line, and Sector 491 reported a thermal alarm 17 seconds before the first weapons impact. Toren looked at her. "Repeat that." She enlarged the timeline. A red marker appeared before the external impact report. 17 seconds. What was firing? Checking. The room shook faintly as something distant discharged. Several displays dimmed, then recovered. Lyra checked weapons load telemetry available through the maintenance network. Surface batteries were active. Super laser charging sequence had started. So the heat could be weapon load. Could be. Overlay the locations. She hesitated. "We don't have full station mapping. Use what we have." The Death Star became a simplified sphere on the display, sliced into sectors and service zones. Toren had always disliked diagrams like this. They made the station look comprehensible. It wasn't. Lyra marked the first thermal alarm, then another, then a third. Toren leaned closer. The pattern didn't spread away from the reported damage. It stepped inward. "Bad telemetry," he said. Lyra looked over her shoulder. "You sure?" "No." Toren pointed at a maintenance shaft running towards Sector 486. "Send an MEC unit with an independent probe." Technician Merak frowned. 486 just went to restricted access. "Send it before the door finishes cycling." A small-wheeled maintenance droid rolled from its charging recess. Lyra clipped a thermal probe to its upper housing and keyed a route. The droid vanished into the narrow service opening. Its camera feed appeared. Steel walls, cable bundles, condensation. The temperature increased. 140, 153, 162. Merak said, "That's not telemetry." "No." The feed jerked. Static crossed the image. Then the screen went black. What happened? Lyra tried the channel. No response. A heavy mechanical concussion travelled through the deck. On the station schematic, Sector 486 changed colour. Sealed. No general alarm sounded. Toren opened an engineering command channel. "Central Engineering, this is Maintenance Chief Korrin, Sector 487. We have independently confirmed abnormal thermal rise extending through 486. Request station level thermal status. Static. Then a voice. 487, Central Engineering. No station-wide thermal emergency is indicated. We've confirmed it physically. Your report is logged. I need upstream power and coolant routing. Restricted. Then tell me whether the thermal events correspond to weapons discharge. A pause. Chief Korrin. Combat conditions are in effect. Localized fluctuations are expected. Localized fluctuations don't move against the coolant gradient. Another pause. Continue normal duties. Central Engineering out. The channel closed. Lyra watched him. Toren said nothing. The answer was not unreasonable. That bothered him more than if it had been stupid. There were hundreds of thousands of systems on the station, probably millions of alarms under combat load. Central Engineering could not reroute itself every time one maintenance chief saw a pattern. He might still be wrong. Build the timeline, he said. Lyra nodded. Everything? Everything. Another tremor. The room went dark. Someone cursed. Emergency lights came on 3 seconds later. Then the main systems rebooted. A new message filled every display. Sector 487. Secondary support classification. Toren felt his stomach tighten. A second line appeared. Automatic isolation in 60 seconds. Merrick whispered, "They're cutting us off." "No," Toren said. He understood immediately. "They're preserving the station." The countdown changed. Combat systems had priority. Weapons, shields, command, reactor support, primary life support. Sector 487 was useful but not essential. The Death Star was doing exactly what it had been designed to do. It was deciding what it could live without. Toren keyed the override. Access denied. He tried his maintenance authorization. Denied. Combat priority. Get security. Lyra opened the channel. A man's voice answered almost immediately. Security control. Major Dresk. Major. Chief Toren Korrin. Sector 487. Automatic isolation is about to seal 47 personnel from primary transit. Then remain at your stations until isolation is lifted. We have abnormal thermal propagation through adjacent sectors. We are aware of combat-related environmental fluctuations. They aren't necessarily combat-related. Chief, rebel fighters are currently being engaged. Surface batteries remain operational. The super laser remains functional. There is no general evacuation order. The countdown passed 40 seconds. Toren kept his voice level. You seal this sector, we lose turbo lift access, medical routing, and 2 emergency corridors. Yes. The answer came without hesitation. If damage spreads, those closures prevent pressure loss and fire propagation into adjoining sectors. Toren looked at the thermal map. Dresk was right about that. Major, something is moving inward through the station. Heat? Energy load? We don't know. Then your responsibility is to remain at your station and determine what it is. And if the isolation prevents us from leaving, then the isolation is performing its intended function. Toren's jaw tightened. Dresk continued. I have reports from 7 sectors requesting release from automatic lockdown. If I override all of them, I turn containment corridors into open pathways during an attack. I will not do that because one maintenance chief has an incomplete model. 27 seconds. Toren looked at Lyra. She looked frightened now. So were some of the others. Dresk's reasoning remained sound. That did not make Toren trust it. Major, somebody needs to look at the relationships between these failures. Central Engineering is doing that. Toren looked at the unanswered request still sitting in his queue. No, he said quietly. They're looking at their failures. What? Nothing. 14 seconds. Toren opened a lower-level maintenance menu. Lyra saw what he was doing. Chief. He removed a protective cover beneath the console. You override locally, security will know. They already know where we are. That isn't what I meant. Toren inserted his service key into the hardline isolation controller. The station demanded confirmation. Override will defeat automatic containment. Dresk's voice came over the speaker. Korrin, do not interfere with the isolation cycle. 7 seconds. Toren thought of the failed droid. The heat moving inward. The command system declaring each event local because each department could see only its own slice. He turned the key. Override. The blast doors stopped. The countdown vanished. For 1 second nobody moved. Then Toren pointed toward the corridor. Auxiliary Hangar 12K. Take emergency kits only. Move. Dresk's voice hardened. Chief Korrin, you are violating a combat containment order. Yes. I will have security intercept you. Then tell them to bring better data. He cut the channel. The technicians ran. Toren followed last. A hiss came from behind him. He turned. White vapour curled through the maintenance passage from the direction of Sector 486. Lyra stopped beside him. The door would have contained that. Yes. The vapour thickened. Toren stared at it for half a second. His override had opened their escape route. It had also opened a route for whatever came next. Move, he said. The maintenance artery curved gently enough that Toren could not see more than 50 metres ahead. The Death Star had been designed on a scale that made human perspective almost useless. A corridor could continue beyond sight and still represent only a minor connection between neighbouring systems. The vapour followed them, not quickly, steadily. Merrick glanced back. Reseal? Ahead, 3 technicians from a secondary pump room were running toward them. Behind, the white haze had begun crawling along the ceiling. If Toren closed the blast door now, the 3 would be trapped. If he left it open, the pressure differential would pull the vapour farther. Leave it. Nobody argued. They ran. At the next junction, the doors opened before they reached them. Stormtroopers filled the corridor beyond. Major Kellan Dresk stood between them. He was older than Toren expected, perhaps 50, his black security uniform immaculate except for dust across one sleeve. He held no weapon in his hands. Chief Korrin. Toren slowed. Dresk looked past him at the technicians. Return to Sector 487. You've seen the thermal reports. I've seen yours. Then you know why we're moving. I know why you think you're moving. A medic hurried past behind Dresk. 2 stormtroopers carried a burned technician on a collapsible litter. 3 more injured personnel followed. Toren glanced at them. Dresk noticed. Sector 472 suffered environmental isolation on the wrong side of damaged piping. We reopened it and extracted 11 people. That gave Toren pause. Dresk had overridden containment when evidence justified it. You think I'm panicking, Toren said. I think you have local data and are drawing station-level conclusions. Somebody has to. Yes, Central Command. They can't see my coolant network. And you cannot see the battle? Dresk stepped closer. Rebel fighters are being destroyed. Surface weapons remain operational. The station is manoeuvring normally. The super laser is functional. If I order technicians away from critical systems because unusual temperatures appear during combat, I may create the failures you're predicting. Toren almost answered immediately. Stopped. Dresk was not wrong. That was the problem. Lyra came forward with the portable display. Major, give us your weapons timing. Dresk looked at her. Why? Toren understood. If the heat spikes are just weapons load, they should track firing events. And if they don't, then you let us continue. Dresk considered him. How long? 5 minutes. 1, 3, 2. Toren nodded. Dresk signalled an officer. Security combat timestamps appeared on Lyra's panel. They crouched over a maintenance terminal at the junction. Lyra aligned the first thermal spike. Weapons discharge. The second, weapons discharge. The third, external impact. Dresk said nothing. Toren felt something inside him sinking. Maybe he had done exactly what Dresk feared. Misread a system behaving normally under conditions he had never experienced. Lyra advanced the timeline. "Wait," she pointed. "A thermal spike. No weapons discharge, no impact. Another. Nothing. Then another." Toren straightened. "Plot them spatially." The points appeared, each one deeper, each one closer to the station's central power architecture. Dresk leaned toward the screen. "What is there?" Toren opened the system layer. Access restricted. He tried another. Restricted. "I don't know." "That isn't proof of a catastrophe." "No." Toren watched another point appear. "But it isn't normal weapons load." The floor moved beneath them. Not an impact this time. A low mechanical surge that seemed to roll through the structure. Dresk looked down the corridor. Then back at Toren. "You get to 12K. I come with you." "You're allowing evacuation?" "I am allowing your group to move while I determine whether you're right." "And everyone else?" "Remains at station." Toren opened his mouth. Dresk cut him off. "If you are wrong, and I start a general evacuation, I can disable this station without the rebels firing another shot." That stopped him. Dresk turned to his men. "Keep the junction open. Medical personnel get priority. No evacuation notice unless it comes from me." Then he looked at Toren. "Show me." They moved. The next pressure door opened. Sound hit them first. A deep mechanical hammering. Then the vast interior of the TIE staging bay appeared beyond. Fighters hung from racks high overhead, like black insects suspended from steel. Pilots scrambled across narrow catwalks. A TIE dropped from its rack. For an instant it simply fell. A repulsor field caught it. The fighter swung violently beneath the grid, then steadied. Tractor beams seized it. The craft shot toward the launch aperture. Only as it reached open space did its engines ignite. Another dropped, then another, then 4 almost together. Toren stopped despite himself. The system was beautiful, terrifyingly efficient. The Empire was finally responding. For the first time since leaving 487, he felt something close to relief. Dresk saw it. "Still think nobody knows what they're doing." Toren watched another fighter vanish into space. A flight technician rushed past carrying a control pack. Toren caught his arm. "How long have you been at full launch?" The man looked annoyed. "What?" "Full launch rate. 3 minutes, maybe 4. Toren released him. The attack had been underway much longer. Dresk's expression changed slightly. A security lieutenant came stumbling through a side access way. Blood covered one side of his uniform. Dresk caught him before he fell. "Lieutenant?" The man recognized him. "Major." "What happened?" "Upper defense access. Fighters came through the trench sectors." "How many?" "Don't know." Dresk lowered him carefully against the wall. "Why wasn't the full wing launched earlier?" The lieutenant gave a confused laugh that became a cough. "Didn't need them." Toren looked at him. "What?" "Surface batteries had it." The lieutenant swallowed. "That's what command said." Another TIE dropped. The repulsor field caught it. Tractor beams hurled it toward battle. Toren turned slowly toward Lyra's display. He looked at the heat points again. Surface damage, weapons discharge, power rerouting, containment, coolant diversion. The station had not been designed on the assumption that it could never be damaged. Its entire architecture disproved that. Blast doors, redundant systems, secondary loops, emergency power, sacrificial sectors. Damage had been anticipated everywhere. But the battle plan had assumed something different, something smaller. No attacker tiny enough to pass through the strongest defences was supposed to be powerful enough to threaten the station itself. So every local system kept compensating, route around the damage, divert the coolant, close another sector, increase load elsewhere, preserve the whole. Again, again, again. Toren stared at the inward-moving pattern. It wasn't evidence the Death Star was dying. Not yet. It was evidence the station was becoming easier to kill. Dresk followed his gaze. What? Toren barely heard him over the launch machinery. The systems aren't failing. Dresk frowned. You've spent 10 minutes telling me they are. No, they're succeeding. Another fighter dropped overhead. Toren pointed at the display. Every time damage takes something offline, the station routes around it. Cooling, power, pressure control, everything keeps functioning. As designed. Yes. Toren looked toward the immense launch aperture. That may be the problem. Dresk said nothing. The station is concentrating load into fewer surviving pathways. The more successfully it compensates, the more dependent the whole structure becomes on what remains. Lyra understood first. If something hits one of those pathways, it doesn't have to destroy the station directly. Toren watched another thermal marker appear closer to the centre. It just has to start something the station can no longer isolate. Dresk's face hardened, not with anger, but calculation. You're saying the station is going to explode? No. Then what are you saying? Toren looked at the thousands of systems still glowing green on Lyra's display. The machine was functioning. Weapons were firing. Fighters were launching. Power flowed. Coolant moved. The Death Star was doing exactly what it had been built to do. I'm saying, Toren said, that every successful repair is making the next failure matter more. Dresk looked from Toren to the thermal map, then passed them toward the launch aperture. Another tie vanished into space. Can you prove it? No. Can you estimate how much reserve remains? Not without core routing. You don't have core routing. No. Dresk's jaw worked once. So we are discussing a vulnerability, not a failure. Yes. And if I order evacuation across these sectors on that basis, I may strip environmental control, damage response, weapon support and medical stations. Yes. Which could make your prediction come true even if the rebels never reach whatever you think they're reaching. Toren held his gaze. Yes. For several seconds neither man spoke. The fighter bay hammered around them. Dresk turned to the wounded lieutenant. Can you walk? With help. Dresk pointed to 2 security troopers. Get him to medical transfer, then return to this bay. He keyed his comlink. Security control, Dresk. Quiet readiness status for service sectors 470 through 510. Open emergency transit paths where doing so does not defeat active containment. No evacuation announcement. Repeat, no general evacuation. A voice answered through static. Reason? Precautionary response to systems instability. Authorization. Mine. There was a pause. Logged. Dresk ended the channel. Toren said, that won't be enough. If you're right, no number I choose now will be enough. Toren started to object. Dresk stopped him with a look. And if you're wrong, I do not get to create panic because you found a pattern. He turned toward the far exit. Your people go to 12K. We assess again there. It was not the order Toren wanted. It was better than the one he'd expected. They moved. A warning tone sounded from Lyra's panel. She looked down. What? Pressure fault. Where? She rotated the display. Her expression changed. Behind us. Toren saw the sector number, then 486. Then the maintenance artery he had left open. The vapour had followed them. They were 2 corridors from the service shaft when the pressure wave arrived. It announced itself as a distant metallic bang. Then another. Then a sound like an enormous breath being drawn through the station. Toren stopped. Down! The order came out before he knew exactly why. Everyone dropped. A white cloud burst around the bend. It filled the corridor wall to wall. Hot, coolant vapour struck the ceiling and rolled forward. A technician farther back screamed. Toren crawled toward him. Dresk grabbed the man's other arm. Together they dragged him away from the vapour. His coveralls had blistered across one shoulder. Lyra shouted, "The next door!" Merak reached the control panel. Not responding. Manual. Pressure differentials too high. Toren looked at the schematic. The open containment route had connected 3 zones that should never have shared atmosphere during a fault. His override. He had done this. A side hatch banged open behind them. 4 people stumbled through from a secondary pump station. 1 fell. Dresk's troopers pulled her clear. Toren stared at them. Without his override, those 4 would still be behind sealed doors. Perhaps alive. Perhaps trapped. The vapour surged closer. There was no arithmetic that made the decision clean. "Vertical shaft," Toren said. Lyra found it on the map. 20 metres ahead. Move. They hauled the burn technician between them. The maintenance shaft was barely wide enough for 1 person at a time. A ladder disappeared upward through a circular throat of conduits and cable trunks. Merak looked into it. "Gravity's unstable." "How unstable?" As if answering him, everyone became lighter. Toren's boots almost left the floor, then full weight returned. "Enough," he said. "Go." They climbed. The shaft had not been built for evacuation. Metal rungs cut into Toren's palms. The injured man below him groaned every time gravity shifted. Emergency lights flickered from red to white and back again. Somewhere beyond the walls, the station continued firing. That was the strangest part. The Death Star did not sound like a dying machine. It sounded busy. Pumps ran. Weapons charged. Doors cycled. Commands repeated over speakers. Systems failed and other systems replaced them. The station was still fighting to remain what it had been built to be. Halfway up, Lyra's voice came from above. "Chief?" "What?" "Thermal nodes are..." "Dropping!" Toren climbed faster. "How many?" 26. "Offline or recovered?" "I can't tell." "Then assume offline." They reached the upper hatch. Dresk forced it open with Merak. Normal white light spilled down. No alarms, no smoke, no vapour. Toren climbed through and found himself standing in a quiet service corridor. For a moment nobody moved. The contrast was absurd. The deck was steady. The air was cool. A maintenance droid rolled past carrying a sealed crate. A public address tone sounded. "Rebel attack elements are being contained. All personnel remain at assigned duty stations." One of the technicians laughed. Not because anything was funny, because the corridor was normal. Toren understood the impulse. They had run through heat, sealed sectors, armed security and a failing maintenance grid. Now they stood less than 200 metres from Hangar 12K, and everything worked. Lyra checked her display. The spikes stopped. Toren looked at her. "All of them?" "Yes." Dresk glanced over. "That matters." "It might." Toren took the panel. The thermal graph had flattened. Coolant demand had stabilised. Pressure deviations were falling. For several seconds, Toren felt embarrassment more strongly than relief. Maybe the station had compensated. Maybe the inward pattern had been exactly what central engineering would have expected under battle load. Maybe he had opened containment doors, endangered adjacent sectors and abandoned his duty station because he had mistaken adaptation for catastrophe. He scrolled backward, then forward. There, a blank space. He enlarged the network layer. What happened to node 488-C? Lyra leaned closer. Unknown. And 490-A? No response. 492 environmental. Nothing. Toren began selecting nodes. One after another returned the same answer. No telemetry. He counted. 31, then 43. The thermal graph was not stabilising. It was losing the instruments that had been measuring the instability. Lyra saw it. "Oh!" Dresk stepped closer. "What?" "The station isn't getting better," Toren said. He turned the screen. It's going blind. A distant light blinked out on the schematic. Another followed. Dresk's face changed. Not fear. Decision. How far to 12k? 190 metres. Go. This time he didn't ask Toren to justify it. Auxiliary hangar 12k was almost peaceful. The bay was small by Death Star standards and enormous by any sane measure. 2 service shuttles sat beside refuelling equipment. One had its nose panels open and half its drive assembly scattered across the deck. The other was intact. A pilot stood beneath it, arguing with a loading supervisor. Dresk approached first. Status of this craft. The pilot straightened. Flight ready. Capacity 12. Dresk looked over his shoulder. More people had followed them out of the shaft. Toren counted 23. The pilot did the same calculation. No, Dresk said. No what? I can carry 12. You can carry more. I can put more bodies inside. That doesn't mean I can launch with them. How much margin? The pilot glanced at the ship. Enough for equipment, not 11 extra adults. Toren walked to the maintenance access panel. Fuel, 82%. Cargo, medical supplies and tools. Dump everything non-essential. The pilot stared at him. That buys mass, not restraints. We improvise them. Chief, one manoeuvre and they become projectiles. We don't need a manoeuvre. We need to leave. The pilot looked toward Dresk. Dresk asked, Launch clearance? None. Can you launch without central authorization? Yes, but the clamps are controlled through hangar operations. Local release. Manual backup. How long to strip the cargo and secure 23? The pilot looked at the group. 90 seconds if everyone knows what they're doing. Dresk looked at Toren. 12 now. Toren knew what he meant. 12 people aboard. Launch immediately. A simple calculation. The safest option available. Behind them, the pressure door opened. 3 more technicians staggered into the hangar. One was bleeding from the forehead. Through the open door, Toren could see movement farther down the corridor. More people coming. People who had reached this route because his doors remained open. He looked at the shuttle. 12. Then at the corridor. 23 already. More coming. Dresk said quietly, Korrin. Toren checked the maintenance panel. The network was worse. He could not see the thermal front anymore. Too many nodes were gone. That meant the catastrophe might be minutes away, or it might already have stopped. He did not know. Dresk did not know either. There was no correct reading left. Only risk. 90 seconds, Toren said. The pilot swore. Dresk did not. He pulled off his uniform jacket, stripped the cargo. Everyone moved. Crates hit the floor. Medical packs were thrown aside. Tool racks came out. Security troopers ripped tie-down webbing from cargo rails. Lyra crawled inside the shuttle and began threading restraints through deck brackets. The pilot shouted weights. Merak shouted positions. Dresk assigned people by size and injury. Nobody discussed fairness. They discussed centre of mass. The burn technician went against an interior bulkhead. Heavier passengers were placed low. 2 stormtroopers locked themselves into the cargo frame and became anchor points for 3 others. 43 seconds. The hangar lights flickered, then steadied. Someone shouted from the doorway. 6 more people. Toren turned. Inside. The pilot stared at him. We're already over. Inside. Toren. It was Lyra. Not warning him, just making sure he understood. He did. Every person added reduced their odds. Every second waited reduced them further. Inside they came. A distant impact moved through the station. Small, almost nothing. Toren barely felt it. The maintenance console chimed. 1 red thermal marker appeared. He froze. Lyra saw his face. What? Another marker. Then 3. Then 12. No, Toren said. They multiplied. Not stepping inward anymore. Racing. 20. 50, 100. Toren had spent years learning the station's engineering grammar. He watched it become meaningless. A power bus disappeared, then another. Coolant pressure reversed. The graph jumped beyond scale. Emergency pumps activated. 2 failed instantly. The hangar lights went black. Someone screamed. Gravity vanished. Bodies, crates and tools lifted from the deck. Toren struck the shuttle hull shoulder first. Red emergency lights came on. Gravity returned sideways. People slammed into the wall. "Clamps!" the pilot shouted. Lyra caught a handhold and pulled herself toward the local release panel. The hangar doors began closing. Of course they did. Containment. The station was still trying to save itself. Dresk hit his comlink. Hangar control, reopen 12K. Static. Hangar control. Nothing. Toren pulled himself along the shuttle hull toward the maintenance junction. The display showed no central clamp power. Local grid is dead, Merak floated beside him. Can we jump it? Emergency bus. That's isolated. Not from service maintenance. Toren tore open the lower panel. Exactly the sort of circuit he had spent his life repairing. For one absurd moment that comforted him. The Death Star had become incomprehensible. This wiring was not. "Give me the auxiliary lead," Merak handed it over. Toren bridged maintenance power into the clamp release circuit. The cable kicked in his hand. A spark burned his thumb. One clamp released with a metallic bang. Then the second. "Clear!" The shuttle lifted crookedly. The pilot fought the controls. Lyra shouted, "Doors!" The hangar aperture had narrowed by half. Dresk and 4 security personnel reached the manual emergency station. The powered controls were dead. They threw themselves against the mechanical crank. It moved centimetres. "Again!" They pushed. The doors slowed, not stopped, slowed. The shuttle rotated toward the opening. Something exploded beyond the rear bulkhead. The entire ceiling flexed. Toren pulled himself into the cargo compartment. "Dresk!" The Major looked at the shuttle, then at the crank. If he let go, the doors would accelerate shut. Toren understood. So did Dresk. "Go!" Dresk shouted. "No!" "Toren!" The ceiling tore open behind him. Dresk shoved one of his troopers toward the shuttle. "Get aboard." The man hesitated. "That is an order." The trooper jumped. Lyra caught him. Dresk stayed on the crank with 2 others. The pilot advanced thrust. The shuttle moved. Toren reached for the open hatch. "Dresk!" The Major looked at him once, no speech, no absolution. He simply returned both hands to the crank. The shuttle accelerated. Toren lost sight of him. The doors closed toward them. The pilot aimed for the remaining gap. A gantry fell. It struck the shuttle's port engine. Metal screamed. The entire craft rolled. Something tore away outside. Then stars filled the forward view. They were out. For one impossible second, there was silence. Toren looked back. He had lived inside the Death Star for 14 months. He had known it as corridors, pumps, decks, consoles, shafts, conduits, lifts and schematics. He had never understood its size. Now it filled half the sky, a grey artificial world. Surface batteries still flashing, fighters moving around it like sparks. Then a point of light appeared inside the station, not on the surface, inside. Toren had time to think. There. The Death Star became white. The blast struck them. The damaged port engine tore free. The shuttle spun. Restraints snapped tight. Someone hit the ceiling. A cargo bracket ripped from the deck. Air shrieked through a ruptured seam. Lyra was shouting something Toren could not hear. The world became rotation and light. A bulkhead tore open. 3 people vanished, then 5. The emergency capsule beside Toren released automatically. Its hatch slammed. For a fraction of a second he saw Lyra through the narrowing gap. Her hand was wrapped around a restraint. Then the capsule fired. The shuttle disappeared. Toren tumbled into blackness. He woke to a repetitive tone. 3 notes. Pause. 3 notes. Pause. Emergency atmosphere. He opened his eyes. The capsule was barely larger than a coffin. His chest restraints had locked. Blood floated in a sphere near his cheek before the weak internal gravity pulled it down. The viewport showed stars, then debris, then Yavin. The Death Star was gone. Toren stared at the empty space where it had been. His hands began shaking. He pressed them against the restraint until they stopped. Status, the capsule responded. Life support, 37%. Propulsion, unavailable. Communications, emergency transmission only. Navigation, passive. Nearby transponders, a pause, none detected. Toren closed his eyes. Lyra, Merak, Dresk. 23 people. He did not know. The capsule chimed again. External storage package detected. Toren opened his eyes. What package? Maintenance Toolkit Synchronization Archive. He frowned. The engineering toolkit clipped to his belt had dumped data automatically before the shuttle separated. He opened the archive. Fragments filled the tiny display. Thermal progression, power routing, coolant reversal, isolation status, bulkhead response, timestamps, incomplete, damaged, but enough. The Death Star was gone. Part of the way it had died was sitting in his lap. Toren stared at the archive, then at the emergency transmitter controls, Imperial engineering data, restricted beyond his authority. If the capsule were recovered by the rebels, the data would go with him. He could erase it. The option appeared immediately. Purge classified systems archive? His thumb hovered over the control. Dresk had been right about some things. Containment had mattered. Order had mattered. Toren had opened doors that should have remained closed. People had survived because of it. People may have been burned because of it. There was no clean version of what had happened. He selected No, then activated the beacon. 3 notes. Pause. 3 notes. The signal repeated into space. The recovered recording from Deck 487 played across the Rebel engineering display months later. Toren stood behind the analyst, watching the last minutes of the Death Star unfold for perhaps the 100th time. Thousands of systems glowed green. One changed to amber, then red. Another followed, then 20. The pattern accelerated inward. The analyst froze the image. So this is where the failure became irreversible. Toren looked at the timestamp. No. You're sure? No. The analyst turned. Toren pointed to the screen. That's where we stopped being able to measure whether it was reversible. The woman studied him. You think another station could have the same weakness? The same one? Yes. No. She seemed surprised. Toren enlarged the routing map. Not if they learned anything, he marked the fighter bays. The launch doctrine changes. Then the isolation network. Containment changes. The diagnostic architecture. Data integration changes. The thermal pathways. Power routing changes. He stepped back. The next station doesn't have to die this way. A communications technician across the room looked up. We have another file. The analyst turned. From where? Captured Imperial burst traffic. Old packet. Heavily corrupted. Put it up. A second window opened beside the Deck 487 recording. Static filled most of it. Then text began resolving. Imperial Engineering Command Project Authorization. The signal broke, returned. 3 words became clear. Second station modifications. The file ended.